I think I'd take Alabama over anybody right now. Just the way that they're playing, the versatility they have as a team. They're so long and hard to defend. They can rebound, they can hit threes, and they can do well when those things aren't happening. So, like if they're having a bad rebounding game, it usually picks up somewhere else. Or if they're having a bad day from beyond the arc, they usually compensate with playing good D. Like we really haven't seen a game where everything just falls apart for Alabama. Like,
what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show. I'm your host, Phillip Jordan, Flash More College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer of Dothan Wolves Football. It is January 24th, 2023, and have a fantastic show planned for you guys today. We're going to be talking all things Alabama basketball and football, heavy into the basketball with Tony Tsoukalas from Tide Illustrated, part of Rivals.com. We will jump around. We'll talk about how Alabama's been successful. Are they the best team in college basketball? They got bumped up to number 2. We'll talk to Tony. Should they be number 1? Does he think they'll get to number 1? We'll break down Brandon Miller, Jahvon Quinerly, all the stars of this Alabama team, what has made them so good this year. And we'll look ahead. They got some big matchups down the road. We'll also talk Alabama football, of course. What went wrong? What was the issues with the 2022 season, and what will be the big storylines going into spring ball and next year? The coordinator situation. Don't have a defense coordinator. Pretty much look like they're going to need a new offense coordinator as well. As Bill O'Brien is probably headed to the Patriots. That's got one of the biggest unkept secrets in sports going right now. Then after that conversation, I'll give my thoughts on NFL divisional round of the NFL playoffs. And also, we have a YouTube comment from last week's show we will get into as well. Remember, you can check out the Phillip Jordan Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And, of course, please give 5 stars. If you only give 4 stars, you are a straight-up hater. You can check out the show over on the YouTube channel, the Phillip Jordan Show YouTube page. Please subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and leave a comment on the video. I'll read that on a future edition as well. You can check out all my written work over at Last Word on College Football. You can always email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Everybody, my guest today is a guy I always go to talk all things Alabama football and basketball. Tony Tsoukalas, you can check him out. He is the managing editor over at Tide Illustrated, part of Rivals.com. And Tony, it's always good to talk to you. I appreciate you taking the time.
yeah, Phillip, thanks for having me on.
I know we are going to talk about an Alabama team that is ranked in the top 5. And it is not the football team to start off this conversation. It is just Alabama ranked number 2. We're recording this on Monday. The new rankings came out. I think there's a lot of people out there who are hoping Alabama would get that number 1 ranking with Houston losing on Sunday and then Kansas being blown out by TCU on Saturday. Yeah, Alabama.
They also lost to TCU as well, or earlier. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. But Purdue's number 1. Purdue was number 1 with that. But what's been your thoughts? Or were you thinking maybe Alabama could have got that number 1 spot today?
I definitely think Alabama could have gotten the number 1 spot, and I feel like if Alabama played Purdue, I think I'd take Alabama, in that matchup. But I think you start heading into the week, Purdue was number 3, and Alabama was number 4. So I think they just since Purdue didn't lose, I think there's just it made sense to some people to move them up, the 2 spots ahead of the 2 teams that lost. I get it. But like I said, I think I'd take Alabama over anybody right now. Just the way that they're playing, the versatility they have as a team. They're so long and hard to defend. They can rebound, they can hit threes, and they can do well when those things aren't happening. So like if they're having a bad rebounding game, it usually picks up somewhere else. Or if they're having a bad day from beyond the arc, they usually compensate with playing good D. Like we really haven't seen a game where everything just falls apart for Alabama. The Gonzaga loss, when they allowed them to shoot like like 60% or something in the second half. I mean, shoot, you're not gonna beat a team if you allow them to do that. That's about the worst I've seen this Alabama team play, and Gonzaga's pretty good. So it's been a great team. This is the best Alabama basketball team, probably. You could argue maybe in program history. We'll have to see, but it's definitely a team that I think can go to the Final Four. I think it could win a title. I mean, there's so many variables to those discussions, but I think this team has unlimited potential.
It truly is amazing, and I tell people all this all the time. Cause like I told you off air, one of my first loves. I mean, everybody listens to me knows. Oh, football. I'm a big basketball guy. Basketball is my first love when it comes to sports. But I remember, and this goes for the state in general, Auburn and Alabama. It was tough watch for both teams for the longest time. And now you got Nate Oates there at Alabama. Of course, you got Bruce Pearl at Auburn. It's a thrill, and it's great. Now, honestly, there's more stakes this year when you really look at it in basketball lately when Alabama and Auburn are playing.
Oh, for sure.
Than football. I mean, and then, of course, that's coming up in a couple of weeks where Alabama will go to Auburn. But to me, just in general, the state, just where the state's at in basketball, it's really a thrill to watch right now.
Yeah, I think when Alabama travels to Auburn, I think you might be seeing a clash of two top 10 teams. I mean, Auburn seems like they're making their run, and I think you're starting to see a shift. I know Texas A&M lost. I wouldn't be surprised if Auburn beats Texas A&M, and I think you're going to start to see it be between Alabama, Tennessee, and Auburn, and I think, and maybe even Kentucky's starting to be on the rise as well. Alabama's already played Kentucky, of course, but I think that Alabama, Auburn, both those games this year are going to be pretty good ones, and I'm looking forward to that trip to Auburn, and I think it's probably going to be the first time Alabama's tested in conference play. I mean, if you look at who they have coming up, I don't think they'll have much of a trouble this week against Mississippi State. And they have the Big 12 challenge at Oklahoma. That could be kind of a tricky game. And then they have on the road against an LSU team that just can't figure out anything at the moment. So, yeah, I think you could have an Alabama team that's 20-2 heading into Auburn, and that could be a real big test.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting stretch for Alabama too, because you'll play at Auburn, and then on the following game, you'll be at Tennessee. So that's back-to-back games. That's going to be some true tests for Alabama. I mean, they're good without a doubt, but those back-to-back games, that's going to be a big test for Alabama, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you could win one of those two games, or actually if you win both those games, if Alabama goes undefeated up until and beats Tennessee, I think you could almost lock up that SEC regular season title, which would be crazy early to do so. But I think there'd be a great chance of them I'd be surprised if they didn't win it at that point. So we'll have to see how it goes. I think that game at Auburn Arena might be the end of the winning streak. Not because I think Auburn's necessarily better than Alabama, but just winning streaks have to end, and that is such a hard place to play. It's such a hard place to play in this rivalry. I could see Alabama and Auburn kind of splitting their games and both the home teams winning, but you never know. And I wouldn't put anything past this Alabama team. I mean, this Alabama team beat Houston on the road, so it can definitely beat Auburn as well.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of last year. Auburn was in that spot, and Alabama could be number one by that time that game is played. And I remember Auburn was number one, riding high. Then they went to Arkansas, which is a tough place to play it. And also, you're right. Basketball, it's different with football. And you go in some environments. But on Saturday, Missouri presented a pretty interesting environment for Alabama as well. That game was close early on, 23-23 with about 4:38 left, and Brandon Miller hit a free throw, and then Alabama goes on a 15-5 run to close out the first half. Looking back at their game against Missouri, what was going on there with Missouri? Were they doing something to give Alabama problems? Maybe Alabama wasn't playing their game. What did you see out of that in the first half?
I just think Alabama was they started fast, if you remember, and then kind of hit a lull. I think that's just, that's what I'm saying. Like, Alabama can win by double digits even when it's playing bad. I don't think it was playing at its best against Missouri. I don't think they won the rebounding battle, but it was a bad rebounding team in Missouri, and I don't think they really won it the way that Nate Oates would have wanted them to win it, especially when you consider the fact that Kobe Brown was out from Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd expect Alabama to kind of dominate the boards a little bit better than it did. But they still won. You know what I'm saying? Like they just find a way to grind it out. And you've got, a lot of go-to guys. most Alabama teams, that over the last few years, they would have died for a guy like, Noah Clowney. He'd have been like the absolute star of the team. And he's the number 2 guy, maybe the number 3 guy on the team, depending, obviously Brandon Miller and Mark Sears. I mean, that's how crazy this team is. I mean, you have a 1,000-point scorer in Jahvon Quinerly coming off the bench. He's probably your 3rd best guard on the team. So that just shows you the depth that this team has. Namari Burnett, when he comes back, he's just going to add. He didn't really do much against Missouri, but he came back. He's going to offer good defense and kind of like be more of a glue guy for Alabama. So it's scary, but this Alabama team could get even better when he comes back.
Yeah, you talk about Jahvon Quinerly, 13 points off the bench. Of course, had the injury last year in the tournament, first round game. But how have you seen him? Because really good game off the bench, like you said. He was 5 of 10, 3 from 7, 3-point. He had 3 assists in the game. Just watching him this year, what's been your assessment of him? How he's been coming along for Alabama, coming off that injury?
Yeah, I think you're starting to finally see the Jahvon Quinerly that you expected to see. I think when he was first coming back, he wasn't really playing up to his level. And I think sometimes Jahvon Quinerly can be a really frustrating player. It's because I think he likes the dazzle, and sometimes, he'll go to the lane and try to make a finger roll or some kind of play, and then he gets swatted down, and you look over and there's a guy open for 3. It's just, you're the point guard, dish it out. I mean, you're probably the best passer on the team. You know what I'm saying? So there's times when his game, it's like, gosh, you got all that talent, like be smarter with it. But I think he's a really good player, and somebody that, when he's playing at his level and he's making the right decisions on the court, he's deadly.
Like to talk about with the depth out this Alabama basketball team has, because when they go to their bench, it's kind of like most teams probably look, okay, Sears is coming out, we can relax. No, you can't, because then you got Quinerly coming on there, and with Sears obviously transfer. I mean, and I was impressed with him on the night because he really didn't have a good shooting day. It was 4-12, but get into the foul line, and Alabama is doing stuff. They're doing championship level stuff this season because with this team, because that's one of the things. Okay. Elite players are like that. Okay, if my shot's not falling, I find other ways. 8 rebounds from your guard, getting to the line 9 times, hitting 8 free throws. That was, a lot of people may not look at that as an impressive thing, but I saw that as very impressive, because still finding a way to contribute, even though maybe the shot's not going maybe like you're used to.
Yeah, and he'll get a pesky steal here and there, and he's just kind of like a pit bull too. He's a tough guy. He'll wrestle around rebounds. He's not like you don't look at him as like a huge rebounding threat, but some of those loose balls he'll beat, bigger guys too. Or if it's like a wrestling match for a ball, he seems to win it. He makes, key steals. Like I said, I'm looking back to that. He was really impressive in that Kentucky game, I remember. But yeah, you mentioned against Missouri. He kind of persevered through a tough start where a lot of players, they get into those funks, and that affects the rest of their game. And the one thing that Nate Oates really stresses is that, if you play through those, if you just focus on the little things, the blue collar, the defense, that the points will come. And that's kind of what happened with Sears. You focus on the hard nose, get to the line, you know what I'm saying? And the points will add up, even if you're not shooting. And then the shots will eventually fall once you start doing well in other aspects of your game. You get that confidence, maybe not through your shot, but through other moments in the game.
Yeah, and get to the foul line can also be key with that, because then you see the ball go through the hoop, and then you say, I can make a shot. I can make a shot. So, just got to, like you said, you got to keep shooting, and then eventually it will fall down. And a guy that's used to, and of course we got to talk about Brandon Miller coming into this. I mean, and that's the thing. And I watch Alabama play. I look at a team, and we talked about, they've got the bigs up front. You brought up Noah Clowney. You've got Charles Bediako, which completely neutralized Oscar Tshiebwe a few weeks ago. That was just super impressive what they did to him. I mean, this was the guy that was the National Player of the Year and has played well against everybody else. And then you've got the guard players I mentioned, but then you've got a guy like Brandon Miller, who is a kind of guy, when you get to tournament time, if the rest of the team is not playing well, you've got a guy that can rise up and just hit shots when they're necessary. What's been your take on Brandon Miller this season?
I mean, Brandon Miller's a top 3 draft pick, and he's the best player Alabama's ever had. I think. I think he's going to be an absolute stud in the NBA as well. I think he's going to be, an eventual top 15 player in the NBA. I really do think that. He can do everything. I think he needs to maybe improve a little bit on his defense, but I think overall, I mean, he can hit a three. He's 6'9". He can drive to the hoop. He can get rebounds. You can basically play him probably not 1 through 5, but 1 through 4. If you needed to, probably more of a wing, but he's an absolutely outstanding player, and it's crazy that they've won some of the games when he's just been off. That's another thing too. You look at this Alabama team, right? Some of those games early, he didn't have the best games against some of the, like North Carolina and stuff like that. I think, if he's on and Alabama's on, they're gonna win, and he's fun to watch.
Yeah, and looking at this team too, and during a 7-game winning streak, not 7-game winning streak, but they're 7-0 start in the SEC. They're winning these games by average of 21 points. I think teams are averaging their field goal percentage is 33%, 22 from 3, and that's a big improvement from this Alabama team from last year. Because last year the Alabama's defense team, I think they're like 11th in the SEC and some defensive statistics there. But Nate Oates and this team, and obviously some new additions as well, but defensively too, I think a lot of people do look at the offense, but defensively they lock you down.
Yeah, that's where you have a guy like Namari Burnett, a guy like Rylan Griffin, some of those guys that don't get mentioned as much, they really provide good perimeter defense. And so even they have a role on the team. You know what I'm saying? You mentioned Bediako. I mean, he's a guy that can really lock things down inside. Noah Clowney's really good. You know what I'm saying? So you got these guys. And like I said, a lot of those guys are really long players. You know what I'm saying? Dom Welch is a guy that, he hasn't found his shot yet, but he can play some defense. That's why he's getting on the court. That's another thing we haven't mentioned too. When Dom Welch finds his shot, because he's been awful from 3, when he finds the 40% that he can shoot from the 3-point line, oh my gosh, it's another dimension that Alabama can unlock in March. So, but yeah, the defense with those guys I mentioned, like you said, that's how they're able to win even when they're not shooting well.
Then finally, before we transition into a little bit football conversation, just looking at this week, of course, they have Mississippi State, and then you have Oklahoma this week in that Big 12 SEC Challenge. Just what are we looking for Alabama this week in the 2 games?
Just remaining consistent. I think that, they should win both of these games, but it's just a matter of doing the little things right, not getting caught up. I mean, they haven't really gotten ahead about themselves, which is kind of impressive because you look how young this team is. The fact that they haven't, gotten cocky about the way that they play, I think that speaks a lot to the maturity of guys like Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney. It's going to be, I think it's your first home game since the Darius Miles situation against Mississippi State. I expect that the energy to be kind of really around the team. It just moved up to number 2. So I think that, that's going to be a good environment. I think they're going to be able to capitalize off of that. And I don't think they should have any problems against Mississippi State. And then the Big 12, SEC Big 12, challenge, I don't know. There's always seems to be 1 or 2 upsets there. You know what I'm saying? So could that be Oklahoma? Maybe. I mean, it's not a team that they're used to seeing a ton. So that could be a struggle. So just, really keeping their focus there and beating an Oklahoma team that's good, but they should be.
Yes, that's gonna be interesting. I'll look forward to that. I've already said my plans. I'm gonna be sitting all day watching hoops, watching all these big SEC Big 12 games. I look forward to that every year. So let's swap up over to football real quickly. Last time we talked, it was after Texas, and and it seems like issues that we talked about in that game were a microcosm of the Alabama season. When you look back on Alabama, it's amazing. Most teams would love to have an 11-2 season where your 2 games you lost by combined 4 points. But this is Alabama. Alabama plays for playoff appearances, national championship. Where did I don't want to know how I word this. Not where the season went wrong. Just okay, I'll just say all this. What were your takes on this past season for Alabama and how they got to that point?
I mean, we talked about consistency with the basketball team. How about consistency with the football team? I think this is an Alabama team that could beat anyone when it was playing its best, but you never knew what Alabama you're going to get. I mean, the way that they played against Tennessee, this is supposed to be one of the best defenses Alabama's ever put together in terms of talent. And then you look at the way they played against Tennessee, it was a joke. I mean, you look at when a guy can score 5 touchdowns against you, the way Hyatt did against Alabama. That's the kind of stuff that like Devontae Smith did to Ole Miss. Like that's the kind of stuff that Alabama does to teams. And you're like, oh wow, they just out talented them. You know what I'm saying? Alabama shouldn't let anyone in the nation score, 5 touchdowns against them. That's just not. That's you shouldn't. That should be like a cardinal sin for Alabama. It's just something I can't even fathom that being an Alabama thing. So like you had too many of those kind of situations happen. You weren't able to finish because even in that Tennessee game, I mean, if they were to be able to put together that last minute drive, if Jahmyr Gibbs was great in that game, but if he was able to catch that ball at the end to give them a first down, I think Alabama wins, right? Because they take some time off the clock. Riker definitely makes a shorter field goal at least, or maybe they score a touchdown. I mean, Gibbs looked like he was going to score in that play. So, and then the LSU game, I mean, they really should have won that game. They had their opportunities. They had a chance to really go ahead at the fourth quarter with the drive, and they weren't able to punch it in. So I think that it was a small detail, and I think Alabama was one of the 4 best teams, but you can't, they just weren't consistent enough when it mattered, and they didn't beat the teams that they needed to beat. Alabama can talk about how they almost beat everyone, but like, who did Alabama beat last year? And so like, when you talk about the playoff, they really didn't beat anyone. I mean, their best win is what, Texas or Mississippi State. Like those are not like, you can talk about their resume and how great they are, and they're one of the top 4 teams talent wise, but they didn't beat anyone because the 2 teams on their schedule that were worth beating, they lost in the last second. And so that's the tough part about the season. The schedule didn't do them much favors, but it is what it is. And it's kind of a letdown season because I think this team, how often do you have possibly the number 1 and number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft on one team and don't even make the playoffs? I mean, that's insane.
My feeling was, and really it's been the last 2 years, and I'd like to hear your thoughts. I felt like there were too many times, and it caught them really the last 2 years, and especially this past season. Too often it felt like Bryce Young was being asked to wear the Superman cape to bail them out of situations. And this year, I mean, he almost did it against Tennessee, and he almost did it against LSU. So, I mean, they were very close to being undefeated and being in the top 4. But it just felt like sometimes this past year, especially this past year, that a lot of times it was, okay, Bryce Young bail us out. And that's kind of, that's a lot to ask of somebody.
Yeah, even with the injury, I think if Alabama beats Tennessee, I think Bryce Young might be your Heisman. If Alabama had made the playoff, the way he played in that Tennessee game, you talk about Heisman moments. I mean, he was outstanding. Some of those extended drives, you're just like, it's like Johnny Manziel back there, just making things happen. The receivers didn't really get open for him. They didn't have that elite guy, and I think that really. That hurt. I mean, you can be good, but if there's nobody open, there's nothing you can do, And I think that when you look back at the stats that in Bryce Young's season, it's going to be, they're not going to tell the whole story because he did make a lot of things happen. And I think if you would have given him an elite receiver to throw to, his numbers would have been a lot better. Just he played very well. He arguably better than he did in his Heisman season, which is obviously saying a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he was a better quarterback than he was, like I said, Heisman, but just in numbers because when the receivers weren't there, he missed the game, and in other factors as well. Looking at Alabama,
missed a game and a half. If you think about it, we missed half the Arkansas game, so that's a half of stats that he could have put up as well.
Yeah, and remember in that game, Arkansas, when he went down, they made a run in that game and almost come back. Then Milroe hits the big run, and then they kind of pulled away in that one. And then, of course, obviously the A&M game where A&M almost beat them. So, it showed why he was so valuable to the team. So, obviously Bryce Young's gone. Will Anderson's gone. There's other players that have left the program going to the draft. Gibbs is one of them as well. But going into spring, what's kind of like you think is going to be the big storyline for Alabama going to spring? Of course, the coordinator conversation is up. Pete Golding went to Ole Miss. I think there's an assumption that Bill O'Brien may go back to New England. And if he does.
Yeah, regardless, I expect Alabama to have a new offensive and defensive coordinator. We've heard rumors. I mean, at the moment, obviously, Schumann from Georgia is a guy that Glenn Schumann is a guy. It seems like he'd be the defensive coordinator. I don't know. Will Jeremy Pruitt come back in some capacity? That'll be interesting to see. One name for the offense. I mean, I don't know when their listeners going to be listening, but is Greg Roman, who just parted ways with Baltimore. There's been some smoke around his name. Like, he's a guy that, obviously helped Lamar Jackson win his MVP, is really good at establishing a run game. I think those are two things that Alabama would love to have. If you look at a guy like Jalen Milroe, if it is Jalen Milroe, I think I don't need to tell you the similarities between what he can do with the ball and what, Lamar Jackson can do with the ball in terms of, so if he can turn, Jalen Milroe into Lamar Jackson, that would be great for Alabama. And then, the running game that the Ravens have had, I think if you look at this offensive line, it could be better for Alabama mixed with the running backs, Jace McClellan, Rodell Williams. They brought in 2 5-star guys. So I think that I think that it could be a solid running team, and he might make some sense, but there's a few guys that can make some sense as an offensive coordinator. Obviously the quarterback battle will be a huge storyline this spring between Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson. And for me, the offensive line, look, if you look at the offensive line, you're going to return JC Latham, but you're also going to bring back Elijah Pritchett, who you didn't get to see him, but he was a top offensive lineman in last year's class. And then you're also bringing in the top offensive lineman in this year's class. How many offensive lines can say that none, I will go ahead and answer my own question, but how many offensive lines can say that they have the top 3 offensive linemen from the last 3 classes, at least according to Rivals? And so that's that's something that could be really special.
That's going to be interesting leading into that. Be paying attention to the Alabama basketball team, what they're doing too as well. Like I said, you got the Auburn and the Tennessee matchups coming up here in February, so it's going to be intriguing for those coming up. And Tony, it's been fun. It's always fun having you on here to talk all things Alabama sports, football, basketball, whatever. We're going to chop it up when it comes to Alabama athletics. But the listeners and viewers want to check you out. Where can they find you and all the work you're doing?
Yeah, well, the site's TideIllustrated.com. Definitely check us out. It's part of the Rivals Network. We've got great coverage of Alabama basketball, Alabama football, recruiting. We also got a really cool forum called Champions Lounge. A lot of conversations like the one we're having on the forum, which is neat. You can follow me at Tony_Tsoukalas on Twitter, or follow us at Tide Illustrated on Twitter as well.
All right. Sounds good, Tony. As always, appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and once again, thanks to Tony Tsoukalas for coming on the show. Always fun to talk to him. Like I said, Alabama could argue they should be the #1 team in college basketball right now, and the football team, always talking about that. The Nick Saban, you got to think with all the talk, and I meant to ask Tony about this, but we just didn't get to it. But with all the talk of Georgia now being the standard in college football, and I've asked people, and we talked about it here on the show, you got to think that Nick Saban's paying attention to that. And he's saying, hold on a second. We're still here. We're still here in Tuscaloosa. So that's going to be very interesting. Let's see if what Georgia's doing does that give Alabama a lot of motivation going forward. And with Alabama basketball, look, this team, they've got the guard play. Talked about it with Sears and Quinerly. You've got, Brandon Miller up front. You got Clowney up front. They've got the bigs up front. They really close you off. You can't really get much points in the paint against Alabama. And then the guard plays great. They defend the 3 really well. Like I said, in the 7-0 SEC start, SEC teams are shooting 22% from 3 against them, 33% overall. So they're very, very tough matchup. But when they do go to Auburn, that will be a tough environment for them to go into. Currently, Auburn has a 28-game home winning streak. That will be tough, I believe, on Alabama going in that environment. Then you turn around and got to go to Tennessee as well, which will be another loud environment as well. So we'll see. Auburn's got a big game on Wednesday night against Texas A&M, and then of course you have the SEC Big 12 Challenge this coming Saturday. Some other stuff we're going to get into before we get out of here. Of course, the NFL Divisional round was this past weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Going into it, so this is the best weekend of football. We didn't get the games that we got a little bit in the wild card round. We had some decisive victories here. We had some good football, some interesting things going on, but it wasn't like it was a wild card weekend. Where 4 of those 6 games all came down to the wire, and these that really. But we'll look into it. Let's look at them. We'll start with the two games on Saturday, and I'm not going to go deep into detail in these games. Just kind of just some thoughts watching these games this weekend. First up on Saturday in the AFC divisional game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, you saw it. Kansas City wins 27-20 in this one. The storyline, obviously, with this one coming out is the Patrick Mahomes injury situation. Hurt the ankle, got rolled up. He really tried to play on it right after the injury had happened. You could tell he was severely hampered by it. He eventually did go into the locker room, get the x-rays. Chad Henne comes in, leads a 98-yard touchdown drive while Patrick Mahomes was out. Mahomes comes back in. He threw for under 200 yards in this one. Really just a gutsy performance by Kansas City. The quarterback was not 100%. They obviously did not like trying to deal with Travis Kelce. He had a big game in this one as well, 14 catches in the game. But I tell you what, Jacksonville blew some opportunities to kind of make this thing interesting at the end to rally while they were down 27-17. Jamal Agnew had a fumble inside the 5. Jacksonville looked like they were going in for a score. And then Trevor Lawrence on the next possession threw an interception. Eventually, they did get within 27-20. Onside kick, they weren't able to get it. And Kansas City was able to run out the clock. But, and I'm going to say this too about Jacksonville. And look, this is a playoff loss. You want to continue your season. You're trying to win a Super Bowl. It's not about moral victories. But I will say this. If you're a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, you look at the young nucleus of this team headed up by Trevor Lawrence. Doug Peterson is a fantastic coach. You really got to be very optimistic about the future of Jacksonville Jaguars. And where the Tennessee Titans are right now, really looks like they're on downward slope. I don't know if Malik Willis is the guy at quarterback. You feel like Ryan Tannehill will probably not be returning there. They seem to be headed toward the opposite direction. And then the Texans are just badly run, and this team just needs a lot. I mean, they could draft Bryce Young, but it's going to be more than a quarterback for this team to be a competitive team there in the AFC South. And then the Colts are rebuilding too as well. They just got to figure out what they're going to do quarterback too and figure out their whole situation there. So Kansas City gets out of here with a win. Mahomes gutted out there in the second half. He played. We'll see if I would bet that he plays in the AFC Championship game, but how effective will he be? Because that ankle, how does it feel on Sunday, the day after? How does it feel throughout the week? That's why right now, with their AFC Championship game, I cannot predict that game because I just don't know what's the status of Patrick Mahomes right now. But they're able to get another win. Andy Reid is the first coach to ever have 10 playoff wins with two separate franchises. Of course, he did it with the Philadelphia Eagles and now with the Kansas City Chiefs. The Philadelphia Eagles 38, New York Giants 7. We were quickly reminded, I think a lot of us, and myself included, were very excited about Daniel Jones and what the Giants did against the Vikings. But then you got to remember the Eagles are a lot better than the Vikings. I think the Vikings were a fraudulent, really, really good team. They won a lot of close games, 11 of them during the regular season. Not much to say this. The Philadelphia Eagles just pounded them on the ground. 268 yards rushing. Kenneth Gainwell, Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, and Boston Scott all totaled that up. And then Jalen Hurts was good through the air, 16-24, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. This was 28-0 at halftime, and it was pretty much not a game from there. The Eagles played like the team they were when they went 13-1 before Jalen Hurts got hurt. So they will be hosting the NFC Championship game this coming Sunday. So then on Sunday, we jump into the AFC Divisional there where Cincinnati defeated Buffalo 27-10. This was the one game I missed in my picks. I went 3-1 on the picks. I picked Kansas City. I picked Philadelphia. And I did also pick San Francisco. But I picked Buffalo to win this one. And I told you guys on the show, when me and Brandon did it last week, I said the reason I'm going Buffalo is because it's the team I picked before the season and for the playoffs to win it all. And obviously that didn't come to fruition. The Bengals controlled this game on the line of scrimmage especially, and really impressive knowing that where the Bengals were from offensive line, playing 3 backup offensive linemen. They did a great job protecting Burrow. I think he got sacked once in the game. And then he was 9 for 9 early in the game for 105 yards to get to a 14-0 lead. He connected with Jamar Chase and Hayden Hurst for those 2 touchdowns. Did a good job getting the ball out quickly with that offensive line. Like I said, Bengals just controlled it, and their defense line controlled things. Buffalo really didn't ever get anything going consistently. When they got down 14-0, they did have a touchdown drive headed up by Josh Allen. Josh Allen just had to kind of, sometimes I feel like he had to play. He was trying to, he didn't feel like it. He was having to play Superman, try to make some great throws. It just wasn't happening. And here's my thing with Buffalo, and we're going to start talking about them like we're talking about some of these other teams that seem to fail in the playoffs now. And it's hard in the AFC. There's a lot of good teams, like good quarterbacks, and this is something I have criticized them for, even though I did predict this team to win the Super Bowl before the year, running the ball. The running game a lot of times is Josh Allen. You just can't do that. You've got to have running game with the running backs, and they really need to improve on that. They need to get better on the offensive line. They need to find some running backs. They need to be more focused on that, take some of the onus of the running game off of Josh Allen. And defensively, they've got to get a pass rush. They had really no pass rush. Like I said, I think they got to Burrow once. I don't have that stat in front of me, so if I'm wrong, I apologize. But I believe they only got 1 sack on Burrow in the game. Didn't really put pressure on him there. They were not the same when Von Miller went down with injury this year. They need to address that. There's a lot of things. Look, you have Josh Allen. You have one of the best talents, top 5 talents at quarterback in the National Football League right now. But there's some spots in this team you got to fix. You need another receiver outside of Diggs, so you need a better number 2 option. But we need to start looking at Joe Burrow. He is that guy. I don't feel like he gets talked enough as one of the top tier quarterbacks in the league. He's 5-1 in the playoffs last 2 years. Of course, they lost in the Super Bowl last year with a even worse offensive line. Got to the Super Bowl last year, and they're 1 game away from getting back there. And just who he is, the bigger the game, the better he plays. No moment's too big for him. And I really think we need to start talking about Joe Burrow a little bit differently. He was 23 for 36 in this game for 242 yards and a few touchdowns in there as well. We talked about those. And then he's 3-0 against Patrick Mahomes these last 2 years, 2 regular season wins, and of course the AFC Championship game win last season. And it really feels like this Bengals team has a real chip on their shoulder too, kind of like they did last year, like nobody believes them. They felt disrespected by the NFL, because I said this last week, and a lot of people, I think it's a good argument to be had. The Buffalo-Cincinnati game should have been at a neutral site. I believe that. And then they ruined the NFL's plans for having a AFC Championship game in Atlanta. And the final game of the division round weekend, of course, was the 49ers playing the Dallas Cowboys. It brings you up memories of the 90s when these 2 teams were meeting each other in the playoffs, usually the NFC Championship game to get to the Super Bowl. They did play last year. Of course, that was the whole fiasco where you run Dak up the middle and try to get the spike. It just didn't work. This game was almost a field goal kick contest. Dallas got a touchdown. Kicker missed again. Another extra point missed by Mayer. But 99 going into the fourth quarter, Brock Purdy hit George Kittle. Amazing catch, amazing play. I think he tipped the ball or juggled the ball about 100 times, it felt like. Not that many, but you know what I mean. For a 30-yard touchdown. Very dramatic. He said he knew the cameras were rolling. He needed to be something dramatic. That's what he said after the game. If you read the article about it. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, 2-yard run to go 16-9. 2 teams exchanged field goals. I don't know what that crap was on the last play of the game. We got Ezekiel Elliott snapping the ball to Dak Prescott, and then he throws a pass, and boom, it's over with. Very, very poor management in that situation. Look, it's hard. You didn't have timeouts. Likelihood of you going to score a touchdown was slim to none, but still, if you're Dallas, you got to come up with something better than that. And the 49ers did wear down the Cowboys defense there in the fourth quarter, got the running game going. Dallas did play pretty well, stop and run. Christian McCaffrey did not have a big day for about 3 quarters there, but he got a touchdown to go up. But really, they wore down the Cowboys there. And look at these 2 quarterbacks, Brock Purdy, the rookie, Dak Prescott. It's kind of like the same thing as Tony Romo, 2-4 as a quarterback in the playoffs. can't get Dallas over that hump. It's not just all on him. There's some other factors as well. 7th straight divisional round loss for the Dallas Cowboys. They have not made it to the NFC Championship game since 1995. And Dak Prescott had 2 costly interceptions. The decision making. Look, he played really great against Tampa Bay in the wild card round, but this game here, he just did not come to play. If you're going to be paid like he is, if you're going to be looked at as the elite quarterback that he has looked to be, you got to do better. And interceptions were a problem with him this year. Going into the playoffs, he had 7 straight games with interceptions. So I think there's some questions now we were going to start asking about Dak Prescott. That's my thoughts on the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Tell me what you guys think. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment below. Give me your thoughts. All right, and finally, to close up today's edition of the Phillip Jordan Show here on January 24th, 2023, I'm going to go to a YouTube comment. Like I tell you guys, you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on YouTube, I will read it on a future edition of the show. We had a comment on last week's show. Of course, me and Brandon, but in the open, I talked about Spencer Sanders going to Ole Miss, and we had a comment on relating to the Spencer Sanders to Ole Miss, and that was by, it's very long here, at GSP Green Stripe Pilot 9508. He said, "You have said what I have been saying since the day game I went to. Dart is not SEC caliber. Lane realized that midseason when Dart wasn't coming along in his development, and that has all but told him. Bye, Felicia." Beautiful. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thoughts on Dart and the Spencer Sanders deal. Or feel like the writing's on the wall that Jackson, I was about to say Dak. We just got done talking about Dak. Jackson Dart is probably going to, I really feel like he will be gone after spring. That's just kind of how I'm feeling about that situation. That pretty much is what Lane kept saying here. Walker Howard is the future quarterback. Spencer Sanders is the present quarterback, and there's no place for Jackson Dart, in my opinion, from afar, what's going on with Ole Miss. But thank you for that comment. Keep on coming, everybody. You can, like I said, leave a comment on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts. And that is going to do it for today's edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. Once again, thanks to Tony Tsoukalas for coming on the show. We'll be back on Thursday. I got a great guest scheduled, one of the regulars. We'll see. We get that going so that we record that Wednesday, and I will drop it on Thursday. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can check out all my written work over at Last Word on College Football. You can check out the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check out the show over on the YouTube channel, Phillip Jordan Show YouTube page. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for all notifications, and please leave a comment on the video, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also email me at sports.phillipjordan@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a great early part of your week. I will talk to you on Thursday. Remember, let kindness be your compass. And you've been listening to the Phillip Jordan Show.